So we are here studying and investigating the practice of Buddhism, both the conduct, how to behave, body, speech, and mind, and with an emphasis on the mind, how to think, how to see things in accordance with the Buddhist presentation or Buddhist presentation. So at the beginning, we set our motivation, which is the critical step. They say in 7-point mind training, which is one of the fundamental teachings, and we'll be talking about that some other time, but there's two things, one at the beginning, two important actions, one at the beginning and one at the end. And one at the beginning, before you start any activity, you can literally dedicate it towards something altruistic, and in this case, becoming a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we're following that advice, excuse me for a moment, setting our motivation by reaffirming our confidence in the Buddhist presentation of how things are. Because we have found, I'm sure none of us are here because we think we've already found the complete path to reliable, constant happiness and bliss. So we have all come to look for alternative ways to think and act. And for now, all of us seem to be gathering together for this Buddhist presentation to benefit ourselves and, most importantly, in this lineage, all sentient beings. We'll say it in English and then do it in Tibetan, like we've been doing. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And we'll actually chant it 3 times in Tibetan. And at this point now, visualize all the teachers, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, anyone and everyone who's contributed towards your path to bring you to this place today with this intention. Visualize those folks in the space in front of you in a purified form, pouring down the nectar of their teachings and inspiration that come into you as you chant this, and then come from your heart into all the sentient beings surrounding you, your mother, father, and your family. So you're visualizing the affirmation, you're reconstructing a beautiful net, a lattice work of beautiful connection between the Buddha, yourself, and all sentient beings. Sangye chodam soki chokdam ma chanchu padu daki kyapsu chi daki chinten gipe sonam ki drola penshir sangye drupa sho sangye chodam soki chokdam la chanchu padu Kyapsu chi daki jinso gipe sonam ki drola penshir sangye drupa sho sangye chodam soki choknam la chanchu padu daki kyapsu chi daki jinso gipe sonam ki Drola penshir sangye drupa sho. I want to address a little confusion in the 3rd line, the daki chinyen gipe sonam ki. For those of us that are students, that is how we are to recite this prayer at the beginning of the class. Christopher was advised by Geshe Nima, because he's teaching, to chant something different. So on a week-by-week basis, you've been hearing him say one thing and looking at this sheet, this says something else. That is the explanation. Okay, we go to the 4 immeasurable thoughts sometimes called the four abodes. These are thoughts that we are meant to have pervading our intention and our motivation in everything we do all day, all the time, 24/7, 365. Especially with an emphasis on us visualizing that as we say this, what we are doing is committing to doing whatever the work we must do to make this an actuality for ourselves. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And just give that a minute's thought. We're here to become Buddhists so that we can find effective ways of actualizing this. Next, just refresh your visualization of being surrounded by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. That's this recitation at the bottom of page 1 that we have not been doing lately, just to save time, but it's good to call to mind that as practitioners in our lineage, Christopher and I, and those of you who are coming and listening, you by default are participating in the Mahayana lineage. This is the vast vehicle. You could visualize it as traveling through the interdimensional space and time with one sole objective: to remove suffering and to cultivate happiness for all sentient beings who have awareness. And so this kind of fraternity of beings are surrounding us, and we have made a commitment to be part of that intergalactic movement of beings. Next, in front of them, then, out of their kindness, they've accepted us into the club of Mahayanas. And so we're going to say the 7-limb prayer out of appreciation for being able to join this movement, for the teachers, especially for the teachers who have directly contributed to our confidence in following such a virtuous great path. 7-limb prayer. Before these enlightened beings, we say, reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends. Turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And then picture all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas very happy that you're participating in this great enlightenment project. And next, the whole point of this path is to purify our activities, purify our thoughts, purify everything about ourselves and what we do, what we think, how we impact cosmos. And so the main thing that we are doing is creating a purified cosmos by our participation. And so in the mandala offering, we visualize that our gift, if you will, the offering that we're making to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, the teachers, and even to Christopher for that matter, is that we want to participate in the creation of a unharming, only helping universe filled with truth, beauty, and goodness, inhabited by sentient beings. So with this visualization, this is why we are doing this path for ourselves and others. So you can put your hands together or whatever, if you happen to know the mudra, and we will sing this if you know it. Sajipaki. And if you don't know it, read the words and just visualize that your offering is to be part of the generation of this, okay? Sajipaki Jokshimento from revolving needed Adi Sangye Shin Mite Uaki Rokunandakshinga Chupasho. And then the Sanskrit offering gesture mantra, Yidam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamya Tayami. And imagine how your teachers would feel knowing that you have committed to this great gift to them and to all sentient beings, creating this universe together. Now, we are, as you may recall, Buddhism is divided. Some ways you could think of it as the wisdom wing and the compassion wing, and this Nagarjuna text would be considered a practice of the wisdom wing. And as such, we turn to the Buddha of wisdom, Manjushri, and say his mantra. We're going to say it 11 times. I'll say it very slowly to refresh your memory. Om, A, Ra, Pa, Sa, Na, Di. So we'll do it once slightly faster and repeat after me, and then we'll go into the 11 recitations. Om, A, Ra, Pa, Sa, Na, Di. Here we go. Om Arapatsana Di, 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 Om Arapatsana Di. And now we'll repeat the seed syllable D, imagining this golden nectar of wisdom pouring into us from Manjushri, repeating D D D D D D D D D D D D D D D D. And that clears out our channels so that we can listen and learn.
Thank you, Kavita. I think it's good to have a fresh perspective.
And traditionally, there's a separate person that leads the chant, and I don't know, just struck me that.
What do they call them?
Umze.
Umze, the chant master. Umze. That was
If you don't like it, please email Christopher directly and tell him to stop me.
No, I just think that a different perspective is always very helpful. Our teachers used to call me the Umze. That was my job early on in the classes, and I would, bang little things in the Vietnamese temple and chant. Okay.
If you are able to let Christopher see you, I think it's nice if he can, but if you are not able to let him see you, that's okay.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I know that we are in all states of attire, so.
Various states of undress.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Oh, you might want to see them too, though.
I see him here.
Oh, okay.
There's Meredith. Look at how beautiful she looks this morning.
Okay, we are continuing with Nagarjuna's Precious Garland. This is session 27. That means we've been doing this for 27 weeks. And this one isn't, I've titled Freedom from Cyclic Existence. And that, of course, is the point. What both the when we talked last time about the different vehicles, and that's the point of each vehicle, is to get free from cyclic existence and achieve freedom from suffering, basically. And then bodhisattvas go the extra mile all the way to enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So I want to do a quick review of these three vehicles and the five paths, not in the detail we did before, but just so that we keep this idea, that we don't forget it. One of the things Kavita and I were talking about this morning, when we used to have a music group that we toured with around the country and internationally, actually, and we had lots of various different kinds of repertoire that we did, and different kinds of instruments that we played. So we'd be playing all kinds of wind instruments and harp type instruments and stringed instruments and plucked instruments and percussion instruments, and singing at the same time in various languages with various ancient dialects. And it was a lot to pull together, even for each person in our group. And the process of practicing was interesting for us, because what we realized is that every time we practiced, every time we refreshed our memory, the finger memory, the vocal memory, the thought, the remembering the words and things like that, every time we did that, and we would then come back to practice again, it would be up a notch, up a notch. And sometimes it would go make a quantum leap. So this is saying something about our subconscious. When we take in information and practice it, whatever that may be, that could be a sport, that could be, anything that you practice. When you repeat it, and you become familiarized with it, it sort of works in the background and grows. And each time you come back to it, you have a stronger and stronger memory of it, and an understanding of it, and an ability to access it, express it, and cognize it. So that's the reason why I'm going to go back over these things, so we don't forget these particular the three vehicles and five paths, because they're a very important aspect of the whole path to being free from cyclic existence. So we talked about the three vehicles: hearer, solitary realizer, and bodhisattva. The hearer and the solitary realizers, those vehicles are suitable for beings of a lesser capacity. In other words, the idea of going all the way to enlightenment to be of benefit to all sentient beings for infinity may be a bit much for some of us to take on board initially, and I could certainly see why. And so that would be the only reason why it was of any lesser capacity, because it just is it's a huge opening up of one's heart and mind to do that. So the bodhisattva vehicle is suitable for those who have a higher capacity. So here are the key distinctions between those three vehicles. The Shravakas, who are the hearers, and the Pratyeka Buddhas, who are the solitary realizers, are motivated by self-compassion. They don't want to suffer anymore. And they work to liberate themselves from the suffering of cyclic existence. The end point of their path is the realization of emptiness, or selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena, which we've talked a lot about. The eradication of afflictive obscurations and emotions. These are all the kleshas, the attachment, the desire, the craving, the greed, the anger, the hatred, the depression, all of these kinds of afflictive emotions, plus the latencies, the seeds, the imprints on our mental continuum by repeatedly engaging in these afflictive emotions. All of those have to be let go of and cleansed, and all these very, very subtle obscurations to the afflictive emotions have to be released before we can actually have that attain nirvana. Nirvana is what the arhat and the solitary realizer are after. And nirvana simply means cessation. And in this case, it's talking about the cessation of suffering. the kind of suffering that exists because of cyclic existence. And that's what the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha, that's their end goal. The bodhisattvas, which bodhi means awake or awakening, and sattva means being, so awakening beings, bodhisattvas are motivated by great compassion, not just for themselves, but for the entirety, the entire infinite, I don't know what you'd say, cosmos of sentient beings. And they work to free all sentient beings from the suffering of cyclic existence. The end point of the bodhisattva path is the realization of emptiness or the selflessness of persons and phenomena, same as the solitary realizers and hearers, and the eradication of the afflictive obscurations and emotions, same as the solitary realizers and the hearers. And in addition, they eradicate, bodhisattvas eradicate what are called the cognitive obscurations. These are the obscurations that still linger about the nature of what we talked about last week, the three spheres, agent, object, and action, as being three separate, independently existing entities. And in actuality, as we sort of got into some detail about that, it's not that at all. They are three dependently arising spheres of relation, dependent relation. And the very subtle obscurations to realizing this is what is the last thing that has to happen before a bodhisattva will attain the enlightenment of a Buddha. So those are the differences in the motivations between those three vehicles. Now we'll go into a review of the 5 paths, and for each vehicle goes through these 5 paths, but in a slightly different way. So the first is the path of accumulation, and this is characterized by a clear understanding of the Dharma, all of the teachings of the Buddha, a very, very clear understanding of them, through which the practitioner can accumulate the positive potential and wisdom that leads to the goal of their chosen vehicle. The path of accumulation begins for hearers and solitary realizers with an unceasing determination, day and night, to be free from cyclic existence. So that is the main focus of one's mind, unceasingly. And that's quite a place to be if you think about it, because we have all kinds of other things on our minds all the time. So this is it's a just to get onto the path of accumulation, that has to be the single goal in your mind constantly.
It would be like Steve McQueen in whatever that movie was, where The Great Escape.
Right.
That's all he thought
It's
about.
like Steve McQueen in The Great Escape. You're escaping, you're digging a tunnel out of
Everything he did every day was about
the Nazi camp so that you can be free, basically. You realize, wow, the most important thing right now is to be free of this for whatever reasons, the different reasons for the different vehicles. For the bodhisattvas to be on the path of accumulation, it requires having a spontaneous realization of bodhicitta, this awakened heart and mind that wishes to be of benefit to all sentient beings, no matter what it takes. So that's not just what's the opposite of spontaneous? A labored kind of, I'm working on this. I think I can get my motivation up to this. Let me think about this. This is weird. So this, when you finally have just a spontaneous, you don't even have to think about it. This is, all you want to do is help others. That's, and unceasingly day and night, you also wish to escape, like Steve McQueen. You wish to be out of cyclic existence. So those two are combined with the bodhisattva. And that's when one has landed on the path of accumulation. The path of preparation. The practitioners of the 3 vehicles gain a very clear inferential, cognitive, conceptual realization of emptiness through the process of shamatha and vipassana, these two types of meditation that work in conjunction with one another. Calm abiding and very clear, clear insight. What is the way of calm, special insight is the way they put it, but it's very kind of a penetrating insight into the object of meditation. So this is a combination of shamatha, which is calm abiding, very calm, stable abiding, and then a very penetrative insight into basically emptiness is what we're talking about. And to have a very clear understanding of that. And both the bodhisattvas and the solitary realizers and hearers are working on this, on the path of preparation. This is preparing them for a direct realization of emptiness. So then the next path is the path of seeing. That's the third path. And all the practitioners of the three vehicles have or achieve a direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness. And the two types of emptinesses, which is the selflessness of the person, the I, the me, and the selflessness of all phenomena, beginning with the aggregates and then how the aggregates interface with whatever's out there, because whatever's out there, it's appearing through our aggregates. We talked about this a lot last week. Claudia, when she gave her presentation on various species, this is quite clear. Not every species experiences the same thing that other species do. And you can think of cyclic existence as just a bunch of species in different realms experiencing different things. So we have to have a very clear understanding of the selfness of phenomena and what that means. It's not just what's out there, but it's all of this. There are aggregates, our feelings, our sensations, our discriminations. Part of it's consciousness as well. So it's a big thing. And so the arhats, the hearers, the solitary realizers, and the bodhisattvas all have this realization of emptiness. Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas become stream enterers when this occurs, and they're on the stream now to nirvana, the cessation of suffering. It's basically they call it solitary nirvana. Solitary nirvana means it's just for themselves alone. The other kind of nirvana, say like a Buddha achieves, would be called nirvana with remainder. The remainder is that you're continuing to work for the benefit of all beings. Okay. And what the bodhisattvas do is they start what are called these 10 grounds or bhumis or levels of realizations that will take them step by step all the way up to the attainment of Buddhahood and enlightenment. So that's the path of seeing. On the path of meditation, these three vehicles familiarize themselves with the direct realization of emptiness they had. The bodhisattvas continue to work on these bhumis, these levels, during this path of meditation. And then the path of, and the bodhisattvas and the solitary realizers and the hearers are also working on removing these afflictive obscurations, and the bodhisattvas are working in addition on their cognitive obscurations. And then the path of no more learning is the highest goal for each vehicle. For Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, this path indicates the eradication of all their afflictive obscurations and the attainment of arhathood, which arhathood means one who is deserving or worthy, and deserving of or worthy of nirvana, I guess, is what they would think, you know. For bodhisattvas, this path indicates the eradication of both the afflictive obscurations and the cognitive obscurations, a complete realization of what the three spheres is, and they attain full enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So that's just the recap of what we discussed in the past two sessions. Any lingering questions on those, or doubts, or observations on any of those things, the paths and the vehicles? Okay, well, we'll just let it go.
On the path of seeing, or when one is on the path of seeing, would it be an accurate metaphor, or at least close enough metaphor, that you intellectually, when you look, say, at a cloud, you know that there are ice crystals up in the atmosphere, and that the cloud, even though it appears to be
No, this would, you mean the path of preparation.
Sorry, yeah,
Path of preparation.
the cloud appears to be a thing. You intellectually penetrate the reality of that cloud, and then at some point. When you look at a cloud, all you see is the ever-changing. It shifts from seeing a cloud, oh, it's water crystals, to look at that undulating mass of coming and going, ever-changing.
Right, there's also the water crystals themselves are.
That's what I mean.
So you're saying that's an analogy for getting
We're going from
conceptual,
intellectual
to of emptiness, real understanding of emptiness, then to the actual realization.
Yeah,
So they work on that continually, yes.
until you just, when you look,
Mhm.
so if you, let's just say you took the cloud as your exercise, or you could take a wave, or
Mhm.
if you took something like that and then intellectually, you started applying it to, oh, okay, this coffee cup is like that.
Mhm, mhm.
And it's a little more difficult because it appears so static, but we know about molecules and stuff now. So that ultimately what happens is when you've achieved that path, everything you look at, what you see is the ever-changing, dependent arising. I mean, that's what you see.
Yeah, and you're continually also meditating on that. You're meditating on what the various things. For instance, like you're talking about particles and waves. Well, then, it's now been found that particles also work in waves. And so you'd be, in terms of emptiness, you'd be continually, constantly working on it and analyzing and then coming to a conclusion and then holding it in single pointed concentration, So that's what the path of preparation is.
So
It's very much conceptual, but working toward
Yeah.
a non-conceptual
So,
realization.
the accomplishment of that is that
Mhm.
then kind of spontaneously,
Right.
when you look at everything, what you're seeing is the dependent arising.
And you continue this combined shamatha vipassana until the point that one day, sometime, some point, there is a direct realization. And I should also say, you can use this process of shamatha and vipassana with meditations such as Dzogchen or Mahamudra. It doesn't have to, it's not, the quality of calm abiding and the quality of very penetrating insight is used in Mahamudra. It's used in Dzogchen. It's not a particular, any kind of meditation that uses these qualities is fine. It functions for what we're trying to do. Personally, I like Mahamudra and Dzogchen. It suits me for some reason, and and this is one of the things that Geshe Tokpa taught us. And I think one of the monks is going to talk about this when they come in December.
Well, that's another
Oh,
story.
yeah. All right, so now we're going to move on to
Thank you.
the next stanza. So previously in stanza 33, we already did stanza 33. Nagarjuna explained, and you may recall this, it was a long time ago. Nagarjuna explained that just as without depending on a mirror, the image of one's face is not seen, in the same way, a conception of I does not exist without depending on the aggregates. No I can arise if there are no aggregates there. Okay, so this then brings us to the next stanza, which is stanza 34. Here's stanza 34. When the superior Ananda, that's a person's name, Ananda, heard what this means, what I just said about the mirror and stuff, he attained the eye of doctrine and repeatedly spoke of it to monastics. So Ananda was Buddha Shakyamuni's personal attendant, was with him all the time. It was like his, not exactly like a secretary, personal attendant. When Ananda listened to the Buddhist teachings on emptiness, he contemplated them, he understood them through inference, reasoning, and logic. So Ananda followed the Shravaka or hearer path. which is why we went into all of this discussion, because if we didn't understand these paths, we wouldn't understand this stanza. So Ananda followed the Shravaka or hearer vehicle. He continued to meditate on the meaning of emptiness. He eventually, in the path of seeing, he attained a direct, non-conceptual realization of emptiness. He achieved what is called the path of seeing for a Shravaka. So the path of seeing is the eye of doctrine that is mentioned in this stanza. When the superior Ananda heard what this means, he attained the eye of doctrine, the seeing, the path of seeing. And repeatedly then spoke of this to other monastics. So he achieved the third of the 5 pathways of consciousness of a hero vehicle that lead to liberation from cyclic existence. With the realization of emptiness, Ananda simultaneously became an Arya. This is what happens, a noble being. When you have that first direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness, you are now a noble being, an Arya, the kind of being that's referred to in the Buddha's first teaching, the Four Noble Truths. Eventually, through continued meditation, Ananda attained the path of meditation of a Shravaka, and finally, the path of no more learning of a Shravaka, becoming an Arhat, which is the highest goal of the hero vehicle, and attaining nirvana, cessation from cyclic existence and the suffering of cyclic existence. Ananda then taught emptiness to other monastics, and he led many of them to liberation as well. And it is said that shortly after the Buddha's death, when Buddha passed into parinirvana, Ananda moved beyond that highest goal of the hero vehicle to achieve the full enlightenment of Buddhahood. But that's just what's said. But I thought I'd pass that along. So now we're going to go into the causes of liberation from cyclic existence. Nagarjuna uses this verse about Ananda to show that the cause of liberation from cyclic existence is a direct, non-conceptual realization of emptiness. He makes this point for the benefit of the lower schools of the Buddhist tenets. All the, from the Vaibhashikas all the way up to the Svatantrika Madhyamikas, the ones just below the Prasangikas. So all of those other schools that are below the Prasangika schools do not have an understanding that you have to have this direct, non-conceptual realization of emptiness that includes both the selflessness of the person, the I, the me, and the selflessness of phenomena, the aggregates, and everything that appears to the aggregates. It's said that a lot of practitioners on the hero or solitary realizer vehicle think that all that is necessary is to have the realization of the lack or emptiness of a self-sufficient, what is it? Self-sufficient, substantially existent I or me. There's no self-sufficient, substantially existent I. And Nagarjuna was saying, no, the reason that he's including this stanza is to show that you have to have both a realization of the selflessness of the I or the me, and the selflessness of all phenomena, starting with your aggregates.
Kind of, if you make that in simplistic terms, would that be that we conceptually slap on a label to aggregated items? So instead of referring to this as a dependent arising of space particles that, blah, 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 we call it a cup.
Of course.
And the same with ourselves. Instead of, is that more or less?
It goes
Selflessness.
it goes deeper than that, because it goes into the whole when we talked about the 3 spheres last time, it goes into a whole understanding that for every being, every species, every being, there are different sets of aggregates. So there are different ways things will appear,
Okay,
and there
so-
are different levels of what you would call conventional reality.
So
It's very complex.
self-sufficient in the sense of being substantially existent.
The only thing, right,
Is
there
what
is
I'm talking
no,
about.
there is no self-sufficient, substantially existent cup,
That's
just
what,
like
that's
there
what I was
is.
talking about.
There's no self-sufficient, substantially existent
So when
me.
we hear that, what we're going is like, oh yeah, we slap a label on things.
Right. We're constructing it, actually.
And then we concretize it and then.
Right, right.
And
the-
that's before you get to the additional, penetrating the additional realization that not only that, but the very consciousness that you are utilizing to apprehend it, is equally, a transitory phenomenon.
right.
Dependent arising.
The
And then
consciousness
it
and
puts the
everything.
whole thing, so that's the.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it's a big
Yeah, thanks.
thing. That is why a realization of the three spheres is the final thing before the omniscience of Buddhahood. So we shouldn't be, we shouldn't be feeling somehow like we're bereft because we can't figure this out yet. It's going to require a lot of what we're doing, practice, talking about it, conceptualizing about it, thinking of, is this important for me to know? Is this going to help me relieve myself and others of suffering? And the answer is yes, but it requires a huge amount of analysis and logic applied to the three spheres to begin to even get an idea of what's been being talked about there on a conceptual level. So Nagarjuna is wanting to cause the proponents of the lower tenet schools to rethink their assertions and understand that it's necessary to realize the emptiness of inherent existence of both persons and phenomena, of both the I and the thing that the I is arising from. We have to have a direct realization of the selflessness or emptiness of both of those things. So here is how I and mine arise. According to the Buddha, the habitual arising in sentient beings' mind streams of a sense of I and mine are deep-seated propensities that are responsible for the compulsive cyclical rebirth in the world of suffering. The habitual sense of I is the innate tendency to assert a truly existing personal identity based on habitually feeling the sense of mine. So I arises from a sense of mine. So they say, and this is in relation to the five aggregates of consciousness and emotion and physical experience. They say that this is what first occurs, is the five aggregates, and then there's a sense that these are my aggregates, and out of this sense of my aggregates, an ego, an I, a me arises. So in this way, the aggregates give rise to the habitual sense of I or me, which in turn gives rise to the habitual sense of ownership. Not only are they just like, this is mine, but whoa, I own it. I own it. And once we get there, we can do this with anything we think we own. It could be, we think we own our kids, we think we own our car, once ownership arises, then these afflictive emotions begin to take hold. This is where the ego comes in and go, wait a minute, that's mine. You keep your hands off of mine, or don't get in the way of what I want or need. This is how all of these afflictive emotions begin to arise. And they say that this ego self-grasping, the I, the me, is at the root of the suffering of cyclic existence, what keeps it going around and around and around. Although it comes out of the aggregates, it arises out of the aggregates. So it's a little bit like a conceptual construct that we make without even realizing that's what we're doing. It doesn't feel like a construct at all. It feels like a really powerful, real thing. Me, I, how we can get. Just look the next time you get really angry at something, you'll be very shocked with yourself. Whoa, where did that come from? I had that happen just last week. It wasn't pretty.
It was exhausting.
It was exhausting, and my God, my blood pressure was so high. Jeez. And it took a lot. It took a lot of contemplation and thinking about this kind of stuff to really get back to a place where we went, oh wow, what a mistake that is. To get all wound up about these things in terms of somehow, you think it's your thing to make sure that nobody else does this or that or whatever it is. So it's as if a spell is cast on us with this I business, the I and the me and the mind, making us believe the I and mine truly exist as independent entities. When we are able to break the spell and see that what we habitually grasp as mine doesn't truly exist, then the habitual I will be abandoned. And when the habitual I is abandoned, the aggregates also will not arise again. The I and mine mutually support one another, and when one is completely undone, the other will also fall away. So this is why they always go together, and why Nagarjuna was wanting those in the lower tenets or the lower vehicles to understand this, because they will not achieve their cessation, the nirvana, if they can't get both of these emptinesses realized. So now we're going to talk about deconstructing the self. As we discussed earlier, letting go of the deep-seated habit to construct an I and mine is likened by Nagarjuna to recognizing that our face in a mirror is not really our face. To deconstruct the self, we first observe the aggregates to recognize that there is no single, unchanging entity that is at the center of experience. There's no one entity that this is all revolving around. There are only momentary elements or factors of the aggregates that continuously, moment to moment, arise and pass away in dependence on innumerable causes and conditions. And it's important to remember that when we're talking about the aggregates, we're not just talking about the body. We're talking about the body, the feelings we have, the various consciousnesses, eyes, ear, nose, tongue, taste, the ability to discern, discriminate. I mean, it's a bundle of things that are working kind of seamlessly together and give the appearance to us as if it's one unified thing. This is why we get this sense of I, but it's not one unified thing. It's a bunch of things working interdependently together.
Christopher?
Yeah.
A question. So are emotions part of that too? I mean,
yes, yeah, emotions. Yes, and we think of emotions as basically there are three kinds of feelings in Buddhism. It's positive, negative, and neutral. But we have all of these things we put onto them. I mean, we have desire, greed, attachment, lust, all these variations of needy, I want. Then we have all these variations of aversion, dissatisfaction, frustration, anger, hatred, depression. It goes on and on. It's some kind of aversion. We're not happy about something, right? So, and then these emotions become they seem like these concrete, real things to us. And most of us don't recognize that the emotions start with a thought. They start with an idea. And that idea then immediately gets into the aggregates and we feel it, you know. And so it seems like it's just, oh, I need to trust my emotions. Many people feel this, that, you know, they have to, it's the emotions that are the most important thing to trust. But the emotions at the root, at the base of the emotions, there is a thought, there's an idea, there's a concept. And that it triggers because of this habitual misunderstanding of what's going on. We believe that these emotions are these solid, real things that kind of, you know, are guideposts for us, rather than being, you know, sort of a result of a misunderstanding of the way things are. So it's a this Buddhist view is quite different than many other views. We find that what we mistake for a self is just our habitual propensity to overlay a conception of I onto the shifting flow of a bundle of aggregates. Nagarjuna tells us that without the aggregates, there can be no I. The I is merely a construct of the mind. Just as the reflection of a face in a mirror is not a real face, the appearance of an I that arises from the aggregates has no real substance to it. When we're able to perceive that illusory nature of the I, we can see that the aggregates are not mine, because if there's no I, nobody's owning these aggregates. They're not mine. This realization opens the way for the realizations that lead to freedom from suffering. That's the bottom line. As I said before, the whole point of the Buddha's teachings, his very first teaching, and it lays out, it's about not suffering. And many people they have a kind of a mistaken view of the Buddha's teachings. They'll go, wow, the Buddha's, it's such a downer. He talks about suffering and the causes of suffering. And what our egos want to hear is, oh, love and light, and isn't it wonderful? And this, I will take care of you and make everything better for you. This is what our egos are craving. And the Buddha's saying, oh, that's not the case, folks. There is suffering. You all know it. We all know it. We all experience it. There's a cause. There's, if you understand what the cause is, then there's a pathway you can take that will get you out of it. But it's gonna be a bit of work, is what he's saying. And most of us want, just pray to somebody and they'll take care of it, right? That's what many of us have been brought up with, and we know it doesn't work.
I remember this pot in the Catholic Mass, just say the word and I will be healed.
I remember that.
I thought that was cool.
When growing up, if you grew up Catholic, there is a part of the Mass that says, through my fault, or whatever. You're saying how bad you are, right? You're just like, I'm so guilty. But then you're saying to God or Jesus or whoever it is, you're saying, but only say the word and I'll be healed. And it's like, wow, it's putting all the power onto somebody else. And as soon as we do that, we're in trouble. There's trouble. And anybody who thinks they have the power over others, that's trouble. And that's not the Buddhist message at all. The message is interdependence, interconnection. There is no one supreme power. You could say interdependence that's the rule or law, if you want to put it that way. And then the flip side of interdependence is that everything is empty of any kind of independent existence. There is no independent existence. And if you want to say that's the law, then that would be the law.
So Christopher, simplistically, it kind of goes back to right view.
Absolutely, yes.
And then all of this, I mean, it's all the correct or incorrect view.
Right.
In a way, right? I mean,
yes.
Fundamentally.
Yeah, mentally, and then everything that
layers and layers and layers and
the
layers.
layers and layers of what we don't call mental. We call it emotion, and we call it all these kinds of things. And yes, we have these feelings, positive, negative, neutral, but they're all connected to the mental and everything else, and the form and everything that's going on. So it is, what I would say is Buddhism is a they call it a religion. I don't know, a philosophy or a practice of mm, responsibility, real, you're taking responsibility for your life, for the direction of your life. You're not saying, oh, somebody else do it for me, I'll do whatever you say, that kind of thing. You're taking responsibility, and it's very mature in that it requires a lot of study, logic, practice. It's a discipline. But the rewards of that discipline are that you have your power. You don't give your power away to something else. Every time, we say, oh, I need you. Would you love me? I need you. Every time we do that, we are giving our power away to the thing, person, whatever it is that we think is going to give us the thing that we're lacking, the thing that we need. And we don't realize we're giving our power away. All we feel like is, oh, I need this so much. And we have a mistaken view of what's going on. And this takes time. It takes practice, it takes study, it takes thinking, analysis, and then little by little seeing the change in oneself because of thinking this way and studying this way and analyzing this way and practicing this way. You can begin to see the changes, and there's more stability. And when you lose that stability, like I did last week, you can go back and rethink it and go, oh, okay, I am just falling back into my old patterns.
You know what was weird about that incident? Because Chris and I were sort of swept up in the same
Yeah, it was a thing that was happening.
kind of like craziness in a way. And at the heart of it was we were in a way abandoning selflessness and thinking of others. And like the next morning when we woke up after this day of we just sort of went, what the fuck was that?
It was just a little trip back into ego.
Yeah, I mean, this is the part that's a little frightening, is that in general, a quote sane adult would have probably entered the conversation with us on the day, because it was all very logical and linear thinking, very conventional thinking, very yeah, no one would have said, oh, how
People would actually have agreed with us. Yeah.
But if you get outside and if you actually become other-centered in a genuine way, where you actually stop imposing your point of view, your way of seeing things, your life experience, somebody's experiencing their life and dealing from a perspective and an experience base you have actually no idea. It's very humbling if you allow yourself to stop projecting your paradigm onto others when you think, how can I help them?
Yeah.
From who you are. And it's not easy to do.
We after a while,
and we're not still there, but
we
now
were
it's
saying,
sort of more neutral.
We were saying, oh my God, wouldn't it be great to be omniscient? Wouldn't it be? Because you'd know what to say and how to help. I will say that the thing that helped me, that really flipped me back to the right way of thinking, is Brian Hermit had asked me. He had an operation on his eye and he couldn't read, and he had a whole set of prayers that he had made for himself. It's great. I mean, it's a beautiful set of prayers. And he asked me if I would record them for him while he was sort of recuperating because he couldn't read. And so I made a recording, and I have the recording myself. And what I was listening to were the 37 practices of a bodhisattva. And I just was totally blown away by them. Could absolutely see what I was doing. I mean, it completely turned me around. And I would realize the value of that and the value of putting that kind of information into your consciousness on a regular basis, like Brian is doing, is very, very helpful. You know, it is the thing that over time will make a huge difference in our level of stress and happiness and all of that, you know. So thank you, Brian. And I'm going to continue to listen to that. And yeah, there's only so much you can listen to in one day, but you know, you do your best. And those things really, really, really help. So where are we now? Stanza 35. As long as the aggregates are conceived, so long thereby does the conception of I exist. Further, when the conception of I exists, there is action. Action means karma. When the conception of I exists, there is action. And from it, there is also birth. So without grasping at the conception of inherently existing aggregates, the appearance of an inherently existing I won't arise. Karma, or action, which is generated by the confusion or the ignorance that grasps and fixates upon I and mine with such clinginess, you know, that will no longer operate once the misconceptions of I and mine are no longer being produced. Where there is no more karma, and karma in this case is referring to actions that are going to bring about results that are not beneficial to oneself or others. Where there is no more karma, there will be no more suffering, since suffering is a result of confusion and its accompanying afflictions of attachment and hatred. There will be no more compulsory rebirth in cyclic existence as well, since compulsory rebirth is also driven by karma, these mistaken actions. So these three mutually dependent processes: one, grasping at the aggregates as mine; two, the construction of a self or I that we lay on top of those aggregates; and three, the karmic actions that arise from these mistakes collectively are the causes for the continual cycles of compulsory rebirth known as samsara, or cyclic existence. So far from and I'm very familiar with it because this is kind of how I grew up. The household I grew up in, my mother in particular was very interested in all things on the well, you know, very much got into New Agey stuff, right? So I'm very familiar with the New Age view of things. And the New Age view of things is that we have a higher self that was very wise and knows what's going on and somehow exists out there looking over everything we're doing. And this higher self made a choice. And this is the difference. It's not compulsory. Your higher self, this is the New Age view, your higher self made the choice to come into this particular rebirth because there are things that you would like to learn.
That's the New Age.
That's the New Agey view. And the Buddhist view is no, it's completely compulsive. You're not making a choice here. You're just thrown into it by your ego self-grasping at I, mine, and all the afflictive emotions that arise. But our egos don't like to look at that. They don't like that view. This also goes back to Brian Herman's question: why are there so few people, hanging around, sticking with Buddhism? Because it does not appeal to this sense of like, give me what I want, give me what makes me feel good, and that's ego. And we have to view it more like a scientist, more like uh, a scientist with a big heart, you know? Scientist with a big,
You
big
know,
heart.
if you wanted to say anything about learning, of course, in an incarnation, there's the opportunity to learn. So it's not to say that there aren't, quote, lessons to be learned by taking a rebirth. It's just, it's not, gosh, I'm so with it. You know, this is you after you die. Me and my quote guides have
Right.
concocted my future family and what I'm gonna do. Cause I'm so with it that I can decide this voluntarily. A good movie that sort of humorously portrays this is Groundhog Day. Cause you can
Okay.
see Bill Murray is just, you know, involuntarily thrown into the next day. Despite all of his efforts to, you know, get what he wants and stop rebirth. So it's more like that.
That's a very,
But, you
very
know,
good movie.
whether he likes it or not, he is, quote, learning.
Yeah. And ultimately what happens is they don't say in the movie how many lifetimes he's had. It could be
Yeah, it could be thousands. We
thousands
don't
and
know.
thousands. I think there was an original script or book where it was over thousands and thousands and thousands of years every day. And what he finally learned, if you're familiar with that movie, is he learned that he couldn't, number one, he couldn't stop himself from coming back. And, you know, no matter how much he would grasp after what he wanted, it never worked out. It never was really satisfying. And he would keep trying and trying other things. Finally, he got into severe depression because nothing was working. He kept trying to kill himself, and that didn't work because, boom, he'd come back to Sonny and Cher singing on the radio every morning at 6. And it's like, it's Groundhog Day. And he'd have to go through this over and over and over again. And finally, he decided, I'm giving up on all this, what I want, what I need. And he began to develop, you know, take the time each day to develop his abilities, to see what was going on with other people. He realized that if he helped other people, it made things,
you know, it was
better, happier.
One of actually the key metaphor they used to show that he had decided to turn himself around and do self-development, they used the metaphor of he went in to take piano lessons.
Yeah.
And, you know, over the course of these thousands of lifetimes, he went from not being able to even know how to pound the keys to playing Rachmaninoff.
And jazz.
You don't see the whole process, but, you know.
And so that's it.
So
in other words, and he was helping everybody. It's other words, you're getting closer and closer towards an enlightened state of being. And the movie does it in such an entertaining way. I mean, and Bill Murray is fantastic in his portrayal of this. It's just a joy to watch. And that to me is a very, very Buddhist. That's a Buddhist view.
And then the pivotal, when he gets out of cyclic existence, when the spontaneous thought arises, what can I do for you today? How can I help others? And, you know.
And he didn't even have to, it was just spontaneous, and he was then released.
Concocted, but with that very shift, when it was fully made, suddenly he's out of samsara.
And the final thing he says is, you know what? Let's just stay here. I love this place. You know?
Once he was liberated.
Once he's liberated, this is the whole idea. Once you've liberated, you become enlightened as a Buddhist. It's not like you want to go off and away and, you know, leave everybody behind. You go, this is wonderful. I can help now. I really know how to do this. Let's just stay here. You know, doesn't matter how long it takes.
Anyway, that's all circling back to the difference between the New Age view of your higher selves up there with the already formed with the master plan.
According to Buddhism, that's a mistaken view of things.
Question.
Yeah.
So it's not the higher self and this other part of you that's looking over and says, I'm going to come back and learn. What is it that throws you back? You know, what is it that you come, what is this?
Why does it throw you back?
How do you describe that? Is it describable?
Yes, they do. They describe it in great detail.
Okay.
It's basically grasping. grasping at me, mine, what I want, what I need, what I'm afraid of, what
And a
I'm,
bit familiar.
Like, okay,
and so you go for what's familiar.
got it, got it, got it, got it. That's very different.
So
Yeah,
this is why working on getting rid of this idea of thinking more like the I is just a construct based on a construct of mind. So the more we become familiar with this, it's like what I was saying earlier when we were practicing instruments to get ready for concerts and things. What we would find is the more familiar we were with it, it would work somehow. These practices worked in our subconscious so that when we came back to practice again, we were several notches higher than we were before. And it kept doing that. And so I think this is the process in Buddhism. You familiarize yourself. This is called meditation, means familiarize. So we're familiarizing ourselves with the concepts, the ideas first. It goes into your little noggin and it cooks there and you think about it. And over time, your own subconscious will decide, is this valid? And if this is valid, then things are going to really start to change.
Christopher is going to address Merritt, your question, and you know, this is very in our lineage. Actually, Buddha drew this chart during his lifetime. So it's not just our lineage, but a core Buddhist thing. In fact, I think it's the first thing he sketched out was the links. They call it the 12 links. Of how we develop grasping and craving, and then that grasping and craving, the next thing that happens is rebirth.
Speaking of, here's the next
So that
stanza.
actually, your question is actually addressed in this very.
You're right on time.
really helpful. This is really, really helpful. It's really different than, I'm so great, I want to come back and learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, just look around and see how valid that is.
Yeah, I mean, oh, yeah.
How many new agers do you know are just, come on.
Anyway, here's the next stanza
No
because
offense to the new
it's
agers.
addressing exactly what you're asking, Merritt, and it's addressing exactly what Kavita just said. 36. With these three pathways mutually causing each other. Remember, here are the pathways. 1, grasping at the aggregates as mine. 2, the construction of a self or I. And 3, the karmic actions that arise from these mistakes. With these three pathways mutually causing each other, without a beginning, a middle, or an end, this wheel of cyclic existence turns like the wheel of a firebrand. So now what he's getting to, we're going to talk about how we transmigrate in cyclic existence through the 12 links of dependent origination.
I'll song actually cover this, and we have. I'll stick a chart in the chat if you feel like you want to download it for later on for your study. But
I'm gonna the 12 links can be you can go into a lot of detail and it can be confusing, and I'm not going to present it in a confusing way.
yeah,
I'm going to present just the basic what they are, because so we don't get bogged down in the some of the teachings can be quite deep on it. All right, stanza 36 is indicating how we circle in cyclic existence through the 12 links of dependent origination. The 12 links aren't regarded as a linear path, but a cyclical one, where all the links are connected to all the other links. Release from samsara can be initiated at any link in the chain, since once any link is broken, the chain no longer holds together. So here's, in the order that they're given or taught, here's the first link. Ignorance. Ignorance in this context usually refers to ignorance of the 4 noble truths, that there is suffering, there's a cause for it, it can be ended, and here's how you do it. Ignorance also refers to the ignorance of selflessness, that there is no self in the sense of a permanent, unitary, independent being with an individual, independent existence. What we think of as our self, our personality and ego, are temporary assemblies of the continually shifting, moment to moment shifting aggregates. To not understand this is a major form of ignorance. And that's the first link. Second link is volitional action, willful action. Ignorance produces the second link called volitional action. Because we don't understand the nature of reality, we have impulses that lead to actions which further us along the path of samsaric existence, sowing the seeds of karma that reflect those mistaken actions or impulses. So that's the second link, volitional action. Third link is consciousness. Consciousness is referring here to basic awareness, and the basic awareness faculties of the six senses: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. There are therefore six different types of consciousness in the Buddhist system: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, smell consciousness, taste consciousness, touch consciousness, and thought or mental consciousness. These are things that we are aware of. Consciousness is equivalent to awareness in Buddhism. So that's the third link, consciousness or awareness. Fourth link, name and form. Name and form refers to the moment when consciousness is joined to matter, whether that matter is very, very subtle or gross. It represents the artificial assembly of the five aggregates to form the illusion of an individual independent existence. Name and form work together with the next link, the six bases or senses, to condition and modify other links. So that's the fourth link, name and form, the consciousness coming together with matter. The fifth link it's called the six senses. Upon the assembly of the aggregates into the illusion of an independent individual, the six senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, arise, which lead to the next links. The six senses relate directly to the next link, the contact between the sense faculties and the objects that form sense impressions. So that was the fifth link, the six senses, the six senses. And then the next link is the sense impressions. So we're on the sixth link, sense impressions. Sense impressions refer to the contact between the individual sense faculties and the outer environment.
Is that sometimes called feeling?
No. No, it causes feeling.
It's after contact, or it is?
No,
contact?
it's after six senses or the six
Okay,
bases.
instead of contact.
No, we haven't. Yeah, it would be yes.
And what's it called?
Sense impressions. It refers to the contact.
Christopher,
He's repeating it.
what is the sixth one called again?
Sense impressions, or sometimes it's called contact, but the sense impressions is much more specific and you can understand. Sense impressions refer to the contact between the individual sense faculties and the outer environment, the objects of the
Okay,
sense
thank you.
Okay, so the contact between the faculties and the objects lead to the experience of subjective feelings, which is the next link. So that was the sixth link, sense impressions, sometimes called contact. I like sense impressions though, because it's quite clear what's contacting what. All right, seventh link is feeling. Feeling is the recognition and experience of the preceding sense impressions as subjective feelings. For Buddhists, there are only three possible feelings, like I said before: positive, negative, or neutral. Or you could say pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Maybe that's better. Pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, which can be experienced in various degrees from mild to incredibly intense. Feeling is the precursor to desire and aversion, the clinging to pleasant feelings and the rejection of unpleasant feelings. So feeling arises based on contact with the senses, on contact with the objects of their awareness, and then a feeling comes of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, and from that feeling of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral comes desire or craving, or the opposite. So here we go to the 8th link, which is desire or craving. The second noble truth, the cause of suffering, teaches that desire or craving is the cause of stress or suffering, or what's called dukkha. If we're not mindful, we are constantly, and watch yourself, I mean, just we look at ourselves, our experience, we are constantly being pulled around by desire for what we want and pushed by an aversion to what we don't want. In this perpetual state, we carelessly and ignorantly stay entangled in the cycle of rebirth. So that's desire and craving. That was the 8th link. The 9th link now is attachment. This is the attached and clinging mind. We're attached to sensual pleasures, mistaken views, external forms, and appearances. Most of all, we cling to the illusion of ego and a sense of individual self, an I, a me, a sense that is reinforced moment to moment by our cravings and aversions. Attachment also represents clinging to a womb or any fertile basis for the beginning of a rebirth. So nowadays we have test tube babies. They're not even in wombs, but it is a fertile basis for a rebirth. And a consciousness in a Bardo state won't see that. Most likely,
We don't know.
won't see that. Most likely will not see it as a test tube in a lab, but they're going to see it as something different and very, very attractive. And they are going to be compulsively drawn to it, compulsively drawn to a rebirth. They say the same thing occurs when there are two people engaging in sex. And it would have to be, I believe, it would have to be a man and a woman these days, right? But they don't necessarily, the consciousness in the Bardo state, in the intermediate state after they have died, doesn't necessarily see the bedroom scene. They'll see something that's very, very attractive, that's drawing them compulsively toward it because of this clinging and desire that we have. And it just brings them compulsively into another birth in cyclic existence. I think I don't know if one of the monks is going to talk about the intermediate state.
Yes.
Possibly. So
That
that would be something to not miss when they're here in December and January. Or Geshe Nima, I think, will be here. So that was the 9th link, which was attachment. The 10th link is becoming. This refers to a new becoming, which is set in motion by the other links. In the Buddhist system, the force of attachment keeps us bound to the life of samsara to which we are familiar, so long as we're unable and unwilling to surrender the chains that bind us. The force of becoming is what continues to propel us through the cycle of endless rebirth. And we'll get to the 11th link, which is birth. The cycle of rebirth naturally includes birth into a samsaric life. It is an inevitable stage of the wheel of life, and Buddhists believe that unless the chain of dependent origination is broken, we will continue birth into the same cycle. Birth inevitably leads to old age and death. And that's the 12th link, old age and death. The chain of links lead to old age and death, the dissolution of what came to be. The karma of one life sets in motion another life rooted in ignorance. A circle that closes is one that also continues. The Four Noble Truths teach that release from the cycle of samsara is possible Through the clearing up of ignorance, volitional actions, craving, and grasping, there is the liberation from birth and death and the peace of nirvana, the cessation of suffering. So this takes us to the next stanza, stanza
I
37.
just put the
The picture? Yeah.
I didn't put the picture, I put it's text only.
Okay, good.
Chart.
Yeah, because the picture can be confusing.
Yeah, the picture's a little
Yeah.
too elaborate,
Yeah.
but you know, if you want, you'll find it out. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not gonna send it now, but
Here's
the
stanza.
chart's in the chat.
Here's stanza 37. Because this wheel is not obtained from self, itself, or self of any kind, because this wheel is not obtained from self, other, or from both, in the past, the present, or the future, the conception of I is overcome, and thereby action and rebirth. So in this stanza, stanza 37, Nagarjuna makes the most influential and original claim of Mahayana Buddhism. He says that this beginningless process of repeated rebirth, which is driven by ignorance and known as samsara, is, quote, not obtained from self, other, or both. The dependently arising nature and production of cyclic existence does not rest on an absolute independent cause of any kind, since the relationship between a cause and its effect is such that the two can never be entirely the same as each other or radically distinct from one another. So we need to listen to this next carefully. If cause and effect are entirely the same, how can anything be produced? It's always necessary for some kind of intermediary agent or agency to be present. And this is especially important to think about very, very logically for us, given the burgeoning industries of cloning and AI. These things don't just happen on their own. There is always something that puts it into action behind it. So it's really important to think of that first thing. If cause and effect are entirely the same, how can anything be produced? And the next is, if cause and effect are radically distinct from one another, entirely unalike, completely, then how can there be any relation between the two? How can anything come from it? Expressing all of this in just a few words, Nagarjuna says that through clear insight into the absence of any ultimately independent permanent cause for cyclic existence, the habitual I can be overcome, as well as karma and rebirth. One is able to obtain the wisdom that is the cause of the highest good, which is the freedom from the suffering of samsara. At the same time, Nagarjuna clearly does not reject causality. Cause and effect are at the heart of all experience and are central to Buddhist ethics and the Buddhist path of Dharma. Nagarjuna only is rejecting unchanging identities for any of the individual components of cause and effect. He's rejecting unchanging identities for any of the individual components of cause and effect. He reminds us of this important view in the next stanza, which is the last one we're going to do for today. 38. One who sees how cause and effect are produced and destroyed does not regard the world as really existent or really non-existent. This expresses Nagarjuna's view of the Buddha's teaching on the middle way. Cause and effect, like all forms of interdependence, requires a kind of relationship that assures independent existence is an impossibility. For Nagarjuna, this perspective is the middle way between existence and non-existence, between realism and nihilism. While Nagarjuna is often understood to be preaching a negative view of absence with as many references to emptiness and selflessness, he also shows great concern, especially in the Precious Garland, that he isn't misunderstood to be preaching a nihilistic doctrine. Nagarjuna's negation isn't meant to negate karma and its consequences as being utterly non-existent. He firmly asserts that by abandoning non-virtuous actions, one can progress on the path and become a vessel of the Dharma. That was it for today. Any questions about that? It takes some pondering, I mean, just putting all this down and writing it, I had to think a lot about what I just was reading about.
Christopher,
Yeah.
can I ask a couple of questions? So one
Yeah.
is in the 12 steps of dependent
Links, yeah.
meditation, 12 links, yeah. So the second one, as I remember, it was karma. So you have ignorance, at least of volitional actions, which is karma, that then somehow is connected to consciousness
This
in
comic seeds,
the next step.
yes.
Mhm.
There's different translations.
Right, these are all coming from Sanskrit words. For instance,
The main one,
consciousness is vijnana. The karma.
Right. So I guess my question is, it's not so much about the terminology, it's
Yeah.
more about the connection between the volitional actions and the consciousness.
Okay.
That leaves a karmic seed.
And so the karmic actions leave karmic seeds that impact the next consciousness.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but then
The seeds. There's always consciousness. That's what we are. The consciousness is beginning. So the actions that we take are affecting the consciousness that affects the pathway of the consciousness.
right. So I guess you said something earlier too, I think, about, or maybe Kavita said about consciousness also being a dependently arising. So how is that true for subtle consciousness as well?
Yes. Yes. Consciousness, awareness itself, if you think about it, awareness itself is impermanent. Awareness is constantly changing moment to moment. So consciousness is a result of previous moments of consciousness. Awareness is not static.
remember the definition.
Oh, so
of
does
consciousness.
this subtle consciousness change while an entity is in the bardo, or I mean,
Yes. From moment to moment, it's not static. It's an impermanent phenomenon.
but if you're imprinting something on it by karmic actions, those imprints are also changing moment to moment.
They do actually, yeah.
It's like adding salt into a river.
We can, like, as you know, say with the practices of like the Merrifield and the Vajrasattva practice of transforming karma. Those subtle imprints that are in our consciousness, we either reinforce them on a regular basis, and so that they become stronger and stronger. It's not like they just are staying the same. Like any seed, and the seed's an analogy. Any seed will be affected by the conditions around that seed. It'll either come into fruition with the right conditions, or with right conditions, it will be, that seed can be pulled away if it's not a seed that's desirable. So it's not just sitting there, being unaffected by everything that we are thinking, saying, and doing. It's always, all of these seeds are being affected. All of these imprints are being affected moment to moment.
And that's
Okay.
for the subtle consciousness.
It's true for subtle consciousness as well. It is not a permanent thing.
You have to,
This goes back to, it has to be, there's a whole study of impermanence. We talked about it in Shantideva. We can split a moment down into these incredible. You know, Claudia talked about this when she was talking about the fly and the experience of a fly. What a fly experience is like frames.
Their
You know,
consciousness moves. you
their
could say
consciousness, they're
taking
seeing,
information more quickly.
yeah, they're taking the information either more slowly or quickly. I don't know which it would be.
Well, they operate on a faster level, so
Yeah.
things that don't operate at their speed
Right,
seem slow.
Seems
That's
slow.
when they watch that's when they watch movies.
The way they watch movies is frame
Yeah.
by
yeah.
frame. It's probably why that would make any sense.
This relates to this question of, well, what is the difference between consciousness and subtle consciousness, or they sometimes say gross consciousness and subtle consciousness.
Mhm.
Or sometimes it's divided gross consciousness, subtle consciousness, and very subtle consciousness. So it's sort of, you know, that.
Well, let's not get into that
that's
discussion
something
right
to
now.
be understood.
Yeah.
We can't get into it right
Yeah.
now, but that's something to it. But
Yeah.
overall, keep in mind that these 12 links, Christopher said this, but we have a tendency to want to
Be very
force
linear.
them into a chain that's always in a particular order. However, you can easily see that anywhere along the line, your habitual attachment or your habitual, you know, these things, it's sort of like adding ingredients to a cake in a different order, you still get a cake.
Right, you're still turning the bowl and putting the ingredients in.
So
One thing I also said is to remember is that any one of these links, if any one of these links is broken, in other words, if we are able to release ourselves with any one of the links, the whole chain falls apart. The whole chain doesn't function anymore. So pick your link, you know.
So essentially, if somebody walks through those 5 paths we discussed earlier, then at the very end, you break the link or links.
When you break the link to being reborn back into this cycle of suffering. Yes, and so the difference is that these solitary realizers and hearers have the concept or the idea in their head that they just want to be free of that and just have a cessation. And of course, that can't really occur with consciousness. Consciousness is endless; it will not stop.
One way to think about this is look at that 12 links as a map of neurotic complexes. And as we work on our Buddhist understanding, it's like being in therapy, and we depotentiate these neurotic habits slowly, maybe one of them. And if you've ever worked in therapy to get rid of a neurotic pattern, you know, sometimes one of them releases before the others. And
They are connected,
it's
definitely.
like that. So you think about this as a map of your the identified neurotic habits, and
to me, Buddhism, this Mahayana Buddhism presents some of the best cognitive therapy I know.
but that is a way to think of it. Is
Yeah.
you're looking at a map of neurotic patterns, habits that are just so that they always say what's the root is ignorance. See, that's why that is always termed as one, because all the rest of them depend on.
And of course, neurotic refers to it's causing some suffering.
Yeah,
it's a mistaken way of being, and that's exactly what the Buddha is saying. You know.
What that last statement that you talked about of Nagarjuna's, Chris, that in a nutshell just made me think you're not who you think you are, you just think you are. It's not real.
Exactly.
And I think sometimes I remember James Lowe said, who was a therapist for most of his life, said, you're never going to get around, you're never going to get through all your neuroses with therapy because you're just confirming your stories and thoughts as real. And they're not. You just think they are.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, and that is the whole point of having a realization of the selflessness of the I and the selflessness of the aggregates.
Yeah, and it makes me think of the ultimate and the relative. And
during
the relative, we can experience the ultimate, and the 12 steps, same kind of thing.
It's like the Buddhist
journey. Is the journey there where you have more and more experience of that realization of the non-I, the ultimate, through being the I during your, you know, wisdom, getting all the wisdom that you listen to on that journey and experiencing that. And hopefully it kind of weighs into a balance towards the end, and you get more of the ultimate experience than just the relative.
Yeah, and again, you brought up a conventional and ultimate reality, and as we've talked about before, they are always joined, they're conjoined, they're always together. So there always will be a conventional I. The difference would be is when we have realized that there is no ultimate I, then the conventional I just becomes a mere label that is used as a way that we can function and interact with one another.
Yeah.
But it's not
the I
the way we think.
Yes, exactly. So it's just we think we are, but we're not really that way.
But we have to realize it. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is the middle way, right?
Yeah.
You have to have a brain to think your way to, not to think your way there, but to accompany you to get there.
We couldn't get there without conception. We couldn't.
Yeah.
We have to have concepts, you know.
Yeah. And then get rid of them. Yeah.
And then recognize that those concepts aren't fixed, that they are, you know, dependent, arising concepts. And we, as science knows, these concepts can change all the time.
Yeah. And I guess those arisings are due to our karma. So it all goes hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It is the middle way, right?
It's, yeah. They say walking the middle way is sort of like walking on a tightrope. You know, you have to have such
practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you want to do our closing prayers?
With that in mind, dedication prayers. Okay, dedication of merit. I'm going to add a word here, a couple words.
Okay.
Due to this merit of having sat here in this class, listening to these teachings, thinking and striving to take it on board to enhance who we are and what we're capable of. Due to that merit, may we soon attain the entitled state of Guru Buddha. Entitled state of Guru Buddha. That we may liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. In English, may the precious Bodhi mind of enlightenment, the mind aspiring to enlightenment, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the view of emptiness, not yet born, arise and grow. And may that born, that which we have taken on board, may it not decline. As Christopher mentioned, let's keep fertilizing the seeds. May that not decline, but increase forevermore. In all my rebirths, may I never be separated from perfect spiritual masters and enjoy the magnificent Dharma, completing all qualities of the stages and paths. May I quickly achieve the state of Vajradhara, that's the primordial Buddha. May anyone who merely sees or hears, remembers, touches, or talks to me be instantly freed from all sufferings and abide in happiness forever. And it is only from the kindness of my Guru that I have met the teachings of the Buddha. Thus, I dedicate all the merits so that all sentient beings in the future may be guided by kind and holy gurus. We'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris Rinkovita.
Thank you, Christopher.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Great seeing you all. Great spending this time with you. And
Yes, thank you.
Always a delight.
I'm so
Thanks,
glad.
Crisco.
I'm so glad that you all come and do this because it makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah,
really.
Christopher wouldn't do it without you.
I wouldn't do it without you.
He's benefiting, and because he's doing it, I'm doing it, and then it all just is good.
It's all good. Okay.
Oh, that's right. Thanks,
Thank you
Kavita.
so much.